Hi, Gord. Well, here we are in video instead of in person. And of course, as Murphy's Law would have it, on the tail end of this 2-year pandemic, you ended up catching this damn thing before stepping on a plane to join us at the award presentation. So, on behalf of myself and the rest of the industry, congratulations on receiving the 2022 Alexander S. Melvin Award for Inspirational and Ethical Leadership in Financial Services.
Well, thank you, Gary. I just can't say, enough how honored I am to receive this award. To even be mentioned in the same breath as Alex Melvin is just such an honor for me. And I can't think of a better way to cap off my 45-year career in financial services, as you know, and I think a bunch of the people in the room would know. I'm down to my last few days here at GBC before I retire and enjoy the things I've worked so hard for over the years. I'm also pleased on behalf of the AIMCO Foundation for Financial Education to acknowledge the financial award that goes along with this award, and I'll be directing it to the AIMCO Foundation. Very pleased about that. And as you mentioned, my only regret right now is that I can't be there in person to accept this award. I was looking forward to it. It was going to be a great way to say hello again and goodbye to all of my friends in the deposit industry. But you know what? There's a golf tournament coming up in September, and I think I'll convince the bank to let me join that so I can say hello to all my friends in person at the golf tournament.
Well, that's great. Well, I know a lot of people who know you here miss you, and I'm sure they're wishing you a swift recovery and also improvement in your golf game by the time you show up. So that's great. Well, if it's okay with you, let's talk a little bit about your background and the journey through your career and what's led you to the point of being recognized as a phenomenal leader. You certainly didn't start out at General Bank. So can you talk a little bit about your early career path and some of the early influences that helped you develop as an effective leader later on in your career?
Sure. Well, it goes back to 1977. It was kind of go west, young man. I packed all my belongings into a 66 Pontiac Parisienne and headed out to Alberta and got a job with a company called Traders Group, which became Guarantee Trust, and it's obviously no more. The main line of work there was heavy equipment financing, and we did a little bit of real estate financing and a smattering of auto dealership financing. In terms of people that inspired me, my old boss there was a guy by the name of Dave Denholm. Had so many words of wisdom for me that I continue to use to this day. And sadly, Dave passed away about a week ago, so at the age of 90. So he had a good run, and he had a lot of great influence on me and a lot of other people. In the mid 80s, National Energy Program in Alberta kind of killed everything. I was transferred back to Winnipeg to the Guarantee Trust office there. I successfully built an equipment financing business there, but that was also a big shop for auto financing. And so I had a lot more exposure. And this is important because it sort of plays into how I got to GBC. That lasted a couple of years in Winnipeg, and I desperately wanted back to Alberta, and it turned out ATB, Alberta Treasury Branch, was hiring. And I got a job there, got landed in a branch on Jasper Avenue, where, as luck would have it, the Wheaton family had just moved all of their business accounts over to that branch. And so here I was a rookie account manager, and but I was the only person in the branch that knew anything about car dealerships. And in Winnipeg, I learned how to read a financial statement, how to count cars in the dead of winter, and those sorts of things. So I was handed the accounts to manage, and that's where I met Don Wheaton. So over the next 16 years, I had a pretty good run at ATB. I moved through the ranks of management, managed branches, and those sorts of things. Wound up as senior vice president of personal and business banking, which sounds very glamorous, but it was a tough job. I wasn't having a whole lot of fun. I was missing my family growing up, and it turns out maybe the feeling was a little bit mutual. I kind of wanted out, and they made the decision easy for me. So I left ATB on April 15th of 2005. Again, luck, timing, April the 12th, 3 days prior, the Wheaton family had been granted the banking license for General Bank of Canada. And I thought, this could be interesting. So I went and had coffee with Don, and he didn't know I had left ATB until I said, have you got anybody to run your bank? And he said, well, we're just kind of getting it off the ground. And I said, well, I slid my resume across the desk and I said, I might be your guy. So one thing led to another. And on June 15th, I joined General Bank of Canada as employee number 3 as its chief operating officer at the time.
So I guess given that General Bank was a startup fresh off a new charter, how would you describe the deposit industry and the people you dealt with back then when you were trying to grow the business?
In terms of growing General Bank's business?
Yeah.
Honestly, I kind of have nothing to do with that. There's an old saying that nothing happens until somebody sells something. And we were blessed to have a lady by the name of Marley Begg, who is our National Director of Dealer Sales and Marketing. And Marley just spent months and weeks on the road signing up dealers and selling car loans, convincing car dealers that they should send this little bank in the basement their business rather than the Royal Bank or whoever else they'd been using. So that is really what drove the growth of the bank. And then later on, when we developed a commercial lending enterprise, I hired Paul Ermintrout, who had worked with me at ATB. And he did the same thing, went out and built relationships. Many of those relationships are with banks represented in the room today. And so both of those people, went out and sold the bank. My job, I was chief operating officer, but at the time also chief privacy, risk, compliance. I called myself chief asterisk officer, but I had to go out and find deposits and figure out, how to fund all these loans that these people were selling. So that was really how the bank grew.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about some of the people that might have influenced you along the way, or at least provided some assistance as you were kind of, not just growing the bank, as you mentioned, other people were part of that, but yourself as a leader?
I think I took a little bit from everybody that I worked with, everybody that was one of my leaders. People hear me quote or say, witty things or wise sounding things. And the truth is I didn't invent anything like that. I learned all of these things from leaders I worked with. So, I already mentioned Dave Denham, my first leader in the finance business. When ATB went through a transformation, Paul Haggis became our president, and he was just an inspirational leader. He stood up in front of the crowd of managers at a very first staff conference we had, and stated this bold vision of ATB to be Alberta's first choice in our chosen markets. And the room was galvanized. It just inspired people to listen to somebody that had that kind of vision and saw the potential in ATB to become what it became. He hired a bunch of people that I wound up working with. Sheldon Dick was one. We launched a small business initiative at ATB, and I was chosen to be one of his key leaders on that team. Learned so much from Sheldon. Amalek Graywall was the chief operating officer that I reported to at ATB. Learned a ton of things from him. There's just so many people throughout my career. I just seemed to land in the right place at the right time to have these great leaders that all gave me a little bit. I would say none of them were what I would call formal mentorship relationships. I never really had that. But I was able to learn and just absorb from all of these people bits of wisdom along the way. And I think they all contributed to my leadership development.
Right.
There's another aspect that wasn't really anybody that I reported to, but as we approached the turn of the century, ATB put us all on a course called Leading Towards 2000. And there was a lady there by the name of Lori Hillis that facilitated these leadership sessions. And I distinctly remember, it clear as a bell to this day, the aha moment that went on in my head during this leadership development course. And I remember riding home on the bus thinking to myself that, my life has changed. I guess I'm a leader and I need to embrace this. And I think my life won't be quite the same as it was before that experience.
Well, certainly since that time and as you progressed, I think when I spoke with you before, you've managed to bump into this guy named Alex every once in a while. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your first interaction with him?
Well, my first interaction with Alex, I mean, as everybody knows, Alex filled a room by himself. You know, he was this larger than life fellow, and I probably met Alex in Scottsdale at a FCIDB conference back in the day. I didn't really know who he was, or I had no idea what Canucks was. The next year, I think, was in San Francisco, and we walked in, and he greeted me and my wife like we were old friends. We sat in the lounge and had a drink together, and you know, so as we developed the deposit business, you know, we started obviously with a client name business, and as we built that out, you know, lots of people that I want to make sure I don't forget to name some of them later, but you know, I remember overhearing a fellow by the name of Bob McMillan at one of the RDBA conferences, and Bob was going on about nominee deposits and Canucks, and I really still wasn't quite sure what this thing was. And I kind of leaned in a little bit, and I asked Bob if I could come and see him the next day, and he said sure. So I went to his office, and he sat there and literally, you know, pushed F9 on his computer and watched these numbers roll across the screen. He says, "There, I just got $8 million from whatever broker it was." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I need to learn more about this. What do I do next?" He said, "We got to go see Alex. He'll fill you in." So next stop was the Canucks office, and I met with Alex, and what an open book. He was interested in our success, and he wanted to see us succeed. And Alex had this slide deck that he used to share. And I call it a slide deck. Reality was one slide, but he'd pull up this slide and he'd kind of walk you through the process of how it all worked. And then he handed me a list of all of the brokers that were on the Canucks system, and even suggested I go talk to, I think it was Dundee was the first one, and you know, just helped introduce me to all these contacts in the industry, and really was the keystone, if you will, to our success in developing out certainly the nominee side of the broker business. He was always willing to help. You know, if I could work it into any trip in Toronto, I'd stop in and say hi to Alex. I took Brian Kulig, our CFO, by. I think Brian's in the audience today. I took Paul Ermentrout by. Paul's got nothing to do with the deposit business, but I said, you got to meet Alex Melvin. He's just such a great guy, and he's been so instrumental in helping us build our business. So that's kind of the impact Alex had, and I think we all have so many fond memories of him at those conferences and in between when he was so helpful to us.
That's great. So given the award itself, then, what does ethical and inspirational leadership mean to you? Or even better, what are your core beliefs regarding leadership in general?
Well, I think the ethical leadership one is the easy one to address. There's a difference, I think, sometimes between doing things right. You know, there's a policy and a process and a procedure and all these sorts of things, and doing the right thing. And I know it sometimes frustrates people. It frustrates me sometimes to have all these controls and everything else in place when my mind just goes to, you just got to do the right thing. And you know, you can lose a deal, you can lose some market share, you can lose some money, but you can't lose your reputation. And the way to protect your reputation is to act ethically in everything that you do. I would say that my earliest role model in that was probably my dad. I remember going to school, and all the kids in the class would have paraphernalia from where their dad worked, you know, pens and binders and all this kind of stuff. And I would say to my dad, "Dad, give me some Air Canada pens, or, you know, binders or something, you know, a backpack or something." He wouldn't do it. He just, "No, that's not right. That's stealing from my employer, and I won't do that." And so he set that bar pretty high in terms of ethical behavior. And then, you know, as I move through life and you become a father, and then you become a grandfather, you begin to put different lenses on things. And, you know, when I think about how you need to act and do the right thing in certain situations, I'll often think about, what would my dad have done here? And then I'll think about, what would my kids and what would my grandkids think about their papa, you know, if they saw him doing this? Am I doing the right thing in their eyes? And that really puts a lot of crystal clarity in my mind around ethical leadership. On the inspirational leadership side, that's a tougher one to answer because I'm not sure that in my leadership journey I've ever sort of intentionally tried to be inspirational. But I'm told that some of the things I do inspire people. So, and I guess when I think of an example of how that might occur, one of the things we do here at GBC is every single employer's very first day on the job, they get to spend an hour with me, the president. And I walk them through what the Wheaton family went through in the early years and how they built their business, where I came from and how I kind of moved through my career and arrived here. And then the story of the bank, the early days, the trials and tribulations of the economic crisis of 08, 09, COVID. So I love to tell the story. I'm passionate about telling the story. And I think, through that, I think comes a bit of inspiration. The feedback is unanimous from employees that go through that process. Wow, there's actually a human being sitting in the corner office here. He's got a life story to tell. He's passionate about the bank. And they kind of get on board with, here we are, this little bank out there competing against the big guys. And the idea of building a bank that can stand for generations, I think resonates with them. And so that sort of thing, I think, does inspire our people, particularly on the generational piece now as we're transforming from my generation of leadership to Eric Dillon's generation of leadership. It's a very interesting time for the bank.
Well, actually, that segues nice into my next question. What advice would you give to the new leaders and rising stars out there who are looking to make a difference?
Well, a lot has changed, I think, since my formative years of leadership, and there's lots of new thought and new leadership, and so many books and everything written about it. I'm a little out of touch with all that modern thinking about leadership, honestly. But there are a few things that I think will stand the test of time. And the first one is just be open and honest about who you are. Include your flaws. I mean, none of us are perfect. I know I'm far from perfect. I often wish that I'd been a little bit more transparent with what my flaws are, because otherwise people spend a bit too much time trying to figure me out. So, be open, be honest, be transparent about who you are. Curiosity, ask questions, be curious. I think that is one of the things that really stood me in good stead over my career. Is I was always asking questions. I was always interested in kind of what was going on the other side of the wall, what was happening in that department. And as a result, I'd get asked to join committees and be parts of projects and those sorts of things, kind of reluctantly at first until I learned to embrace those things. But always be curious and get to know your business. Challenge stuff respectfully, especially today with machine learning and AI. They're not infallible. They're just as fallible as the next as a human being, really. There's an old saying about computers: garbage in, garbage out. Well, these are just fancy computers, and you need to be careful about just accepting what comes out of some of these things. And the other thing I would say is just be present. Be there, be visible. Don't refuse any extra assignments. Never ever ask the question, "What's in this for me?" If you like, that answer should be obvious. And if it's not obvious, then I don't know what to say. But I sort of dislike it when people say, "Well, if I do this, how does that kind of look on me, or how does that help me with my career advancement?" Stay humble. You can be noticed without being loud about it. You can be ambitious without being obnoxious. There's a word that Eric Dillon used when he had his exit interview from Connexus, and that word was humbition. And with his permission, I'll use that word. I think it's a great word. You can be ambitious yet humble at the same time, and I think that's a good message. And lastly, I would say, don't always just view yourself and your leadership as if it's through the company lens. There's other aspects to leadership. You can be a great individual leader. You don't necessarily have to lead large teams, and there's only one president in every company, and so everybody sort of has to find their level of leadership, and that can be at the individual level, whether you're, in your work team, but perhaps more importantly outside of work. Think about your slow pitch team or your cycling team or your kids hockey team, your parenting, basically just being a good human, I guess, is what I would say, is being a good individual leader. I think that would probably encapsulate my advice to young leaders or people aspiring to leadership roles.
Right. Well, that's tremendous. And well, I'm certainly, with your experience and what you've had to offer, it's had a huge impact to the industry and certainly the people in the room. So I just want to wrap it up and thank you so much for your time and insights. It's greatly appreciated. And again, congratulations on receiving the 2022 Alexander S. Melvin Leadership Award, Gord. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks very much, Gary. And one thing, if we could, just before we leave, there are some other people that I wanted to acknowledge.
Sure.
Through this whole thing. When I talk about the deposit industry and how much a part of me it's become over the years, there's some people, obviously Alex, we talked about, Huguette Holmes. A lot of people in the room will know her from Canadian Western Bank, now retired. John Little, another giant of the industry. I think that's a previous winner of this award, who was so helpful in helping us set this business up. Bob McMillan, I mentioned, everybody at the RDBA, Jim Schweitzer and Scott Fryer. Jim's in the room today, I know. All those people were transparent and open and helpful in helping us be successful in this business. And I just want to acknowledge all of them. And lastly, thank the nominating committee and the Melvin family for continuing to present this award, and for to Canix for facilitating the whole thing and arranging this. And again, I miss everybody there. I wish I was there in person, but I'll see you in September.
That sounds great, Gord. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thanks again.